46 and following is to 45 and following is to make any sense. But there isn't that consistency. Between these two, intimate knowledge on the part of the New Testament of the Old Testament. Constant textual citation. Then you have the Grand Canyon. And then you have the Quran. No. Vocal only. Oral tradition only. No intimate understanding. Grand Canyon. Sort of makes that argument. And see, the problem is that Surah 5 argument sounds to me like one of the places where Muhammad is actually establishing his credentials as a prophet, as one to receive revelation in the great Abrahamic tradition. So that thing falls apart. You got a problem.
Do you remember Qul Hu Allahu Ahad we mentioned earlier? He is Allah, the one and only. The word Ahad in Arabic means one and only. There is another Hebrew word called Echad. Actually, my my friend Lincoln spent about 1 hour explaining to us the word Echad in one of our private discussions, and I'm refuting that today. What does it really mean? Lincoln would argue that the word Echad means compound unity. It doesn't mean one single being. It means compound unity. The Christian would read Deuteronomy 6:4 as follows. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is compound unity. How did you come up with this description? The word is very innocent.
Okay, now, hopefully, if you've listened to my response up to this point, you already know where you're wrong here, right? I mean, I understand what Lincoln is saying. Echad is, in fact, used in the Old Testament. You know, you're even going to bring up the one cluster of grapes. It's a cluster of grapes, but a cluster of grapes is a compound unity. But that's not the point. You're assuming, and this is where I've corrected you in the past, I'm not holding you accountable for, it'd be sort of like one Roman Catholic apologist did to me, where he came out with a book and criticized me for not refuting his book, even though his book was written 10 years after my book had been written. So it would be just as silly for me to be sitting there going, well, Al, I already told you about this. Well, I told you about this after you did this. So, but I do have to make reference back to things that we've said before, just so that we can keep the program going and actually accomplish something, eventually get to the end of this. But as I said earlier, hopefully you see where your problem is now. You think that we are saying that from the beginning, God's revelation of his nature has been triune. There are some people who actually say that. Well, your argument, you can take that up with them. I believe that while God has always been triune, and while there are a number of prophetic statements in the Old Testament that, in light of New Testament revelation, show us this, Yahweh and Sodom and Gomorrah and kissing the Son and all the messianic prophetic, Isaiah 9 and there's a number of places where these issues come out. That the real revelation of the doctrine of the Trinity is between the Old and New Testaments. And so I don't have to argue I don't have to try to shoehorn plurality or person, nature, person being distinctions into Echad in Deuteronomy 6:4. I don't have to do that. Because this is before the incarnation of the Son and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Instead, what you should see is what I pointed out in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, and that is that this Echad becomes the twice repeated Hais in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. There is one God, Hais Theos, Echad Elohim, and there is Hais Kurios, Echad Yahweh, Jesus Christ. So you have to deal with the expansion of these words by a monotheistic Jew. Now, you may be one of those that, try to do the Paul's a terrible, horrible guy thing. I don't know, but that's what you have to deal with. And so this isn't really a big argument for us. I mean, there are places where echad is used of groups of people, clusters of grapes, that kind of stuff. But since you're not making the distinction between being and person, you're really not dealing with what our argument is anyways. Because we believe that God is one in being. We just don't believe he's one in person. And in light of 1 Corinthians 8, 6, and 7, this text is ours. You have to cut that off. You have to... And again, I see that as a difficult thing for you to do as a Muslim, because you're on the far side of us. And your own text, as far as I know, and maybe you can think of something that I'm not really thinking of, but as far as I know, the only positive thing the Quran says about any other religion at all is about us, about Christians. So you've got to somehow get over us to get back to this text and try to cut the connection between Old and New Testament. And again, you may do so, but it will require you. This is interesting. Think about it this way. It will require you to argue on a higher level and with more information than the Quran ever does on this subject. And why might that be? Didn't Allah know in eternity past when the Quran wasn't written? It's eternal. So can't even ask questions about that, I guess. But I often wonder, in light of the Orthodox Sunni understanding of the eternality of the Quran, how you would answer a question, didn't God know the context into which the Quran was going to go? Because it strikes me that one of the things that has greatly enhanced biblical studies and greatly enhanced the Christian faith has been the result of the attacks of unbelievers, post-Enlightenment unbelievers, on the Bible has been an ever-deepening scholarship of the Bible. And some of the things that, for example, for me are most